We have got breaking news tonight with a new ultimatum in a violent showdown in the Middle East that is threatening to explode. As Israel tells some 100,000 Palestinians, you have hours to get out of your homes or you may die.
The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens and layeth the foundation of the earth and formeth the spirit of man within it. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebo and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, Asser also is joined with them. They hope in the children of Lot. Selah.
Overnight, the Israeli military warned residents in the eastern Gaza Strip to leave their homes in an effort to minimize casualties, sending text messages and dropping leaflets. As the Egyptian ceasefire fails to get off the ground, the Israeli government promises to ramp up its military campaign. Threat of a ground invasion looming as soldiers and tanks line the Gaza border, but the Obama administration says it hasn't ruled out a ceasefire just yet.
I am prepared to fly back to the region tomorrow if I had to, or the next day, or the next, in order to pursue the prospects if this doesn't work. But the Egyptians deserve the time and the space to be able to try to make this initiative work.
Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. For Gaza shall be forsaken, and Ashkelon a desolation. They shall drive out Ashdod at the noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. Woe unto the inhabitants of the sea coast, the nation of the Kerethites. The word of the Lord is against you. O Canaan, the land of the Philistines, I will even destroy thee, that there shall be no inhabitant. And the sea coast shall be dwellings and cottages for shepherds, and folds for flocks. And the coast shall be for the remnant of the house of Judah. They shall feed thereupon. In the houses of Ashkelon shall they lie down in the evening. For the Lord their God shall visit them, and turn away their captivity. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity, to deliver them up to Edom. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon, and I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord God.
In the early morning hours of Thursday, I.D.F. soldiers identified a group of 13 terrorists attempting to enter Israel via a tunnel in the southern Gaza Strip. The tunnel was one of several the I.D.F. had recently uncovered that were to be used to smuggle terrorists into Israeli cities. I.D.F. soldiers attacked the group. Several fatalities were reported. The tunnel has been destroyed as well. No I.D.F. soldiers were injured. An I.D.F. spokesperson said that the terrorists were nabbed as they emerged from the tunnel. The I.D.F. had prior knowledge that the terror attempt would take place and was ready for the group. The group was heavily armed, and indeed, had they gotten past the I.D.F. patrols, they would have been able to commit a major terror attack. killing many people and nabbing hostages. This according to IDF sources.
Well, Shepard, we just heard 2 loud explosions behind me just to the north of us here along the coastline, and we've seen heavy artillery fire. It's really intensified, Shepard, over the course of the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes here. Both cannon fire from offshore and artillery fire that looks like it's coming from across the Israel-Gaza border. Now we're in Gaza City here to the west. We're hearing a lot of action, a lot of explosions to the east as well, and that's where apparently this offensive is being moved in. The ground forces, as you mentioned, going after the tunnels, trying to root up these tunnels using equipment including D9s. These are these massive tractors and bulldozers that go in there and could really basically take out any tunnel. And we saw it earlier today before this ceasefire happened this morning here at 10 a.m. local time, when 13 Hamas militants, according to the Israeli Defense Forces, went across the border through a tunnel, came up near a kibbutz, basically a Israeli community, Israeli village. They were spotted. One was killed. The others scrambled back into the tunnel. There was an airstrike. Not sure if the rest were killed. But this has been the main concern all along since all of this started about these tunnels. Basically, the transportation and the shipment of these missiles, M75 rockets, M75s, M305s. M75s have a range up to 50 miles. M305s, M302s have a range up to 100 miles. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of take a look behind me again to the north. We're in Gaza City. We're along the coastline. There's been a lot of explosions. We're hearing more. We're hearing tracers. We're seeing tracers coming off the coast. I don't know if you can see this, but those are tracer fire. That is fire. That's cannon fire from a naval vessel offshore hitting. Okay, you can see that they're targeting a location north of us. See if there's anything else. Tremendous amount of fire there to the north. That's probably maybe a quarter mile, a half mile, mile up the coastline. This area has seen a lot of action over the course of the last 10 days, and including over the weekend, when we saw an intense firefight from basically that area just up there. We were so close, there was tracer fire going over our heads as well. Hold on, let me listen for a moment. Okay, we're hearing choppers in the distance. Those are most likely Apache, Israeli Apache helicopters. We've seen Hellfire missiles being fired. Again, cannon fire from naval vessels. Okay, we're not hearing anything else at the moment, but this has been the pattern all night. There'll be some silence, and then artillery fire, cannon fire will intensify. And basically all the lights are out in the distance. You can't see any lights because the electricity has been shut off. So everything is dark, but it gets illuminated, obviously, when you see those explosions, when you hear the cannon fire, when you see the tracers. So I'm just listening for a moment. I hear choppers. I hear the constant hum of Israeli drones overhead doing surveillance. Earlier we heard what sounded like the F-16 Eagles, F-16 fighters. Okay, now it's a little still, but again, really this artillery fire, the fighting has intensified, as you mentioned, as ground forces are now moving in to Gaza. Shepard?
Wow, it is an incredible thing to watch. This had been the fear all along, that Israel would feel like it needed to resort to this. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had been getting a lot of pressure from his right, from hawks who said this has to be stopped and stopped now. Some pressure from his left as well. Now this has begun. John, do you have a sense for the exact locations where they moved in? The Prime Minister has described this as a limited ground invasion.
Right, I think, well, Shepard, we're in West Gaza here. So behind me, that we're looking north. They're moving in, I believe, from the east. So the east would be camera right, probably about man, 3.5, 4 miles possibly from the Israeli-Gaza border. So that's the east. That area has really been hit hard as well. In fact, we were at a hospital in East Gaza, a rehabilitation center for disabled folks, Wafa Hospital, that was hit with artillery fire yesterday. Or overnight anyway. It was hit by cannon fire, tank fire, maybe 105 millimeter, 155 millimeter, not sure. Nonetheless, that area has seen a lot of action because it's very close to the border, and all along that stretch of Gaza, Shepard, that's where the Israeli military has really been focused on those tunnels. Now, there are a lot of areas here in our area in West Gaza. Hold on a second. A lot of areas where we've seen rocket launches in and around West Gaza and Gaza City. So we've seen a tremendous amount of airstrikes in and around our location where we're staying. And as I mentioned, just up the coast, seemingly where that cannon fire was just coming in, that's where we saw some heavy firefight when ground troops, special operations troops, stormed the beach and hit a Hamas location over the weekend. Now stand by. I'm hearing something else in the distance. Hold on.
Watching
I don't know if you could hear that.
John, these look like flares that the Israeli military often uses to light up an area as they move in.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that as well. We've also seen the artillery fire. We've also seen Hellfire missiles, Shepard, being fired from Apaches offshore. And I just mentioned how I'm hearing the rotor blades in the distance. But I'm just kind of keeping an eye out, looking to the northeast, to see if we see any other tracers, any other flares, and any other artillery. You know, bottom line, Shepard, this has been intensifying now for the last hour. So it's really, the artillery fire has really been ratcheted up quite a bit, Shep.
This began at 10:30 local time there, so what, close to a half hour ago.
Right.
During the day, John, there was 5 hours
right.
of calm, and we saw pictures. The streets were crammed with people.
Well, they were. At 10 a.m. was the ceasefire in order to allow people to get out of their homes who have been holed up in their homes for the last 10 days, to be able to go get supplies, go to the market, and also go to the banks. We saw the banks were just packed with people because you got to understand, a lot of these folks haven't been paid, not only over the last 10 days, but even before that. So they were trying to just get money out of the ATMs in order to go shopping. So we saw basically a stampede at one bank of people trying to get money out of the ATM. And then over the course of the day, just people going out, going to the stores, going to the markets, running errands before that 3 o'clock deadline, when right after 3 p.m. local time here, Shepard, rockets were launched, missile strikes were happening, and then heavy artillery fire. And over that period of time onward, and then after the sunset, we've noticed things continuing to intensify, and then over the last hour, really getting a lot of fire. Hold on one second. Okay, so yeah, things were busy today. I talked to one woman in the line at the supermarket who said, look, I've been holed up in my home. I've been in my home for 10 days with my children. This is the first chance I've been able to go out, go to the supermarket. I'm scared. We're living in constant fear. We just want this to end. But at this point, it's looking like, in terms of a ground offensive, that's just beginning.
John,
so bear with me, Shepard, because yep. I'm hearing...
Stay with it, John.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's you, man. Go.
I just want to listen for... Yeah, I just want to listen for a second because I'm hearing what sounded like, again, artillery fire. And it's tough, Shepard, because, again, we're in Gaza City, we're in West Gaza. This offensive, okay, in the distance, there's some illumination. It looks like in the distance, the eastern side, that's where the forces will be moving in. We saw a small contingent of ground troops come in from the coast over the weekend, but that, I think, was more targeting a Hamas rocket launch site. Okay, hold on. Okay, again, more artillery fire. We haven't heard any small arms fire. Okay, that's artillery fire in the distance. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay, more tracer fire. Come to the right. Come to the right. Let me get out of the way. Coming from offshore. Artillery fire. Okay, so they're coming from both the west and the east, Shepard. So ground troops from the east, naval vessels, Apaches from the coast, from the west coming in. So basically they're moving in from both sides. But again, the ground offensive would be coming from the east and probably the northeast as troops. That's where the troops have been amassed, with the tanks, with the D9s, those bulldozers, which are really the tunnel busters. They'd be coming in from the eastward direction, and we've seen artillery fire, Shepard, that looks like it's coming in from the north as well, and then also from off the coast. So, and again, it's so hard to hear because you see, you have the fire that's coming from the east, and then it's basically all directions, and then of course the constant hum of the drones above us, and I see also overhead in the distance what looks like a fighter jet. So they've been doing, that's been a constant thing throughout the days that we've been here in the 10 days, Shepard. The hum of those drones, hold on. The drones humming above, doing surveillance, reconnaissance, and then every now and again the roar of those F-16 Eagles coming in, and then a missile strike. So there's a lot of action going on in North Gaza and Northeast Gaza, and every now and again, to the left, Mal, we're seeing that cannon fire from offshore. So things are heating up. They're definitely heating up as we go into day 11 now here on the ground here in getting up to day 11 here in Gaza. So again, more tracer fire, more cannon fire to the left there.
John, I'm wondering if did you have any heads up on this? Did you guys get word in advance, hey, something may be going down tonight?
No, but hold on, and there's more, hold on one second. Are you seeing that, Mel? Let me get out of the way here. All right, so they're really honing in from offshore. I don't know if you can see that tracer fire. They're really hitting something right on the coast.
We can see it.
Okay, Shep, yeah, to answer your question, no, we did not get a heads up. However, the I.D.F, Israeli Defense Forces, have been warning people the last 2 days to evacuate from their homes. Shepard?
In more breaking news, Israel Defense Forces have just announced they've launched a major ground operation in the Gaza Strip. This is video just into our newsroom from Gaza. This comes just a day after 4 young boys playing at a Gaza beach tragically lost their lives to an Israeli bombing. Journalists staying at a nearby hotel saw them just before they were attacked by a barrage that appeared to come from the sea. Parents and several journalists ran onto the beach trying to save the boys. Warnings from Israeli armed forces via Twitter and dropped leaflets are not proving effective at clearing Gaza of civilians, with families saying there's nowhere for them to evacuate. RT's Harry Fear is in Gaza for us.
I caught up last night with the 4 families affected. These 4 families, all from the extended Baka family. We spoke to them. They were, of course, absolutely destroyed by the events. It was a devastating exercise to speak to them.
هاي مصور على الفيديوهات ولادي مصورينهم بيلعبوا على شط البحر قصفتهم اضطرت اسرائيل 3 قذائف طفل في حدود 12 سنة.
They, of course, invoked the fact that these were innocent children simply playing on the beach, that, of course, they were not responsible for any belligerent activities. We saw tens or even hundreds of family members congregated in sympathy and solidarity, mourning with the parents of the lost children. This story has even really hit a nerve with the international journalists here who directly witnessed the incident. Some of them actually tried to give first aid. They were having their lunch at the time, many of them in these hotels overlooking the beach, the marina and the Mediterranean coastline. They reported the sudden emergence of a light on the horizon, followed by a shelling which targeted a small structure on Gaza's marina. This was then followed by another shelling tens of meters away, absolutely close to where the Palestinian boys were running away from the site of the first shelling. I also caught up with one of the eyewitnesses, the manager and receptionist of one of those hotels overlooking Gaza's seaport.
They was running, escaping from the bomb All of them were injured, and one of them, his face was full of the blood, and his leg and his arm, you know. So then I called the ambulance to pick up them.
It's not clear why Israel may have targeted this area during the day. It is understood to be at night used by Palestinian militants, but not during the day. And we will keep you updated.
That was RT's Harry Fear. As the violence continues to unfold, the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee has approved nearly $550 billion in defense spending, which would include $621 million for Israeli missile defense programs. Of this, $351 million will be for the Israeli Iron Dome system, which intercepts short-range rockets and mortars. The system, which has been credited with preventing Israeli deaths in the latest hostilities, was financed in part by hundreds of millions of dollars from the U.S. The bill will need to be approved by the full Senate, then reconciled with a similar bill in the House of Representatives before being signed into law by the president.
Are you too close, John?
No, I don't think we're. I just want to. I want to kind of. Yeah, that you see, that was a heavy explosion. Heavy explosion to the north. That's probably maybe a mile and a half. Maybe about a mile and a half. All right, let me put this down. So, I mean, at this point, I'm just waiting for artillery fire to come close to our location based on those flares going up. I mean, that is literally right up the street from us. That's where we were earlier today. We were driving all through the area. Okay, more cannon fire offshore. It's more cannon fire offshore. You can hear the concussion. So you hear the cannon fire, you hear the echo, and then you hear the strikes. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Another explosion. All that's coming from the east. Those sounds are coming. The cannon fire came from the west behind the camera offshore. You're looking from the camera's vantage point, you're looking to the east. More cannon fire. There's another. So they're hitting. They have to be hitting. I'm just trying to figure out. They've got to be hitting a target to the northeast and to the east, where we've seen a lot of hits. I'm just trying to get a fix on where I'm hearing. So cannon fire coming offshore, targeting a location to the northeast of us. We're in Gaza City, so that'd be northern Gaza. We just had several flares come within about 300 yards of our location here to the west. So really, Shep, I'm just kind of keeping it. Give me the mic. I'm just keeping an eye out. I want to make sure that we are not going to be put in a position where, if there is heavy artillery fire, if we have to scramble inside, we can get inside very quick. And again, this area, our location here in Gaza City on the coast, has really been a high target area. There's been, even as I said about 20 minutes ago, there are rockets launched from this area. So this has been a high target area, and East Gaza. We hear that they're really hitting East Gaza in the area of Wafa Hospital. Again, a location we visited that was hit by artillery fire yesterday. And even while we were there, Shepard, it got dangerous. We packed up and got out of there quick because we heard a lot of rocket fire and a lot of incoming strikes. That's East Gaza. So that area is probably getting hit hard right now. And of course, in the distance, you can see the moon rising. But just illuminating kind of the eastern part of Gaza that's getting really hit right now. And that's where those troops have been amassed over the border. And we don't have any read on the movement right now. If they are going into that no man's land you talked about, Shepard, if they're going into that open area, if they're pushing in at this point, and exactly what the first contingent will be, what the force, what the ground troop, what the actual number of infantry and heavy artillery going in is going to be. I don't have a number on that, but Hamas released a statement saying that Israel will pay for this. I'm paraphrasing.
John Huddy, who's live with us. John, don't move.
We're also following another breaking news, this one out of the Middle East. The Israeli military says it has launched a ground offensive in Gaza. For the latest, let's go to Stephanie Freed in Tel Aviv. Stephanie, I imagine this news does not come as a big surprise.
No, it hasn't come as a big surprise. There was speculation. It was going back and forth. Israel had called up 40,000, or they'd gotten the approval, the government, to call up 40,000 reservists. Then they got approval to call up 8,000 more within the past day. There was speculation that there would be, and lots of pundits were saying that probably there would be a broadening of this operation. Well, 2 hours ago it happened, and there was a ground incursion that began in Gaza. And from what I understand, reading from the reports of Israel's military spokespeople, as well as speaking with people on the ground in Gaza, which I have done since this incursion began, this is coming by sea, by air, and by ground. And it's it's the most volatile, according to my sources in Gaza, living there now, speaking from there now, the most volatile attack that they've seen during the past 10 days of this operation by Israel's military. Of course, Israel's army, Israel's the defense spokespeople say that this is an operation, and the government says, of course, this is an operation to root out Hamas terrorism, to get rid of their rocket launchers, their weapons, and so on. The price has been a good high number of casualties, civilian casualties, more than 200 killed inside Gaza, many children, elderly, many are suffering, humanitarian crisis there. But again, a little less than 2 hours ago, Israel launched its ground offensive into Gaza, not saying how long it will be. The government says, quote, that they will carry on until Israeli citizens feel peaceful. Hamas, in response, spokespeople are saying that this is a foolish decision on the part of Israel's government that will have deadly consequences. So waiting to see. Rockets are still being launched from Gaza into Israel. But again, this is the start of this operation. Where it will end remains to be seen.
Stephanie, what is this going to do to the humanitarian situation in Gaza, which was dismal to begin with?
It couldn't improve, that's for certain. It is dismal. According to Oxfam figures, 80% of the people living in Gaza are relying upon international aid to get by. And that international aid can't really get in when there are airstrikes going on, when there are rockets coming out, when there's a ground offensive. People aren't getting medication. They're not getting the food they need. They're not getting water, running water, the basics, electricity. People there are suffering. And again, when I spoke to my contact in Gaza, he said that people are terrified now since this ground offensive started. They're in their homes. They had a brief reprisal today when they were able to go out for a few hours. There was an agreed upon humanitarian ceasefire between the sides. Let people go out, go shopping, withdraw money from the bank. That lasted 5 hours. Now they're back hunkered down inside of their homes, and they're terrified. And with the crisis and things lacking, like the basics that I talked about, including medicine and medical care, it could only get worse.
All right, Stephanie Freed, thank you so much.
The Jerusalem Post and others are reporting now that a ground invasion of the Gaza is beginning as we speak, that the Israeli Defense Forces have begun a large-scale movement, a significant expansion of operations, as they put it, on the Gaza border by land, sea, and air. A Gaza resident tells the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, quote, "They're firing from every direction. Everything here is shaking," unquote. According to the reporting of Haaretz, Palestinian sources report heavy Israeli artillery fire throughout the entire Gaza Strip. And these are live pictures from Gaza City. Our sister network, Sky News for the United Kingdom, which is well staffed there as we are, their correspondent in the Gaza reports that just in the last 5 or 6 minutes, all power was cut to Gaza City, which is the biggest city there, like 1.7 million people, very, very densely populated. The entirety of the Gaza is the size of 2 Washington, D.C.s, with a population infinitely greater. And now the power has been cut, and it's our understanding from the Jerusalem Post reporting and others that a ground incursion has beginning. Here's what has begun. Here's what else we know. The last thing the Israeli people and its leaders want right now is large numbers of casualties on either side of the border. It's the last thing they want. But as you know, talks between Israel's leaders and Hamas, the ruling authority there, brokered by President Sisi in Egypt, broke down completely. There is no truce, there's no ceasefire. And now you can see on the left, if we put up the sky pictures, please, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, Gaza City. Well, now they've switched over. But at any rate, the power had been cut, and Jerusalem Post reports that the invasion has begun. We don't know how deeply they will go. We know that part of the Israeli Defense Forces' goals and the Israeli government has been to stop the rocket fire which has been coming from the Gaza into Israel. They want to get to the tunnels, get to the weapon storage areas, stop the movement of missiles, and the hope was that they'd be able to do so with these airstrikes. But because of the lack of a truce now, it appears that a full-on operation has begun. I hesitate to say invasion, despite the fact that the Jerusalem Post is reporting that ground forces are moving in. We don't know how far they will move into the Gaza. There have been times in the past when Israeli Defense Forces have gone in just far enough to get to rocket batteries, etc., that are very close to the border. At other times, they've moved all the way in and taken over for short periods of time in an effort to get rid of the rockets which are firing into Israeli territory. Doesn't matter your politics on this matter. Doesn't matter which side you are tied to philosophically and politically or whatever. The truth is a ground invasion will bring casualties on both sides because Hamas and the forces inside Gaza have had years to prepare for the moment that Israel comes back. And they've had weapons coming in from Iran, and they are heavily fortified. The population is so dense, we have confirmed now that there was weapon storage inside mosques, inside people's homes, and that as the I.D.F., the Golani Brigade, or whatever goes in the beginning, whoever goes in will be met with great force because Hamas has been preparing for this for years. John Bussey from the Wall Street Journal is with us. It seemed once the talks broke down and the peace initiative that was brokered by the Egyptians broke down, that something more would happen. They promised something more would happen. Well, something more has happened.
Something happened, and this is what everybody was trying to avoid. At least the Obama administration was trying to avoid, and other interveners in this. The United Nations brokered a 5-hour ceasefire. During that time, people in the Gaza Strip poured out of their homes. They went to the bank. They went to stores. They reloaded on all the necessities of life, but they were smart enough at the end of that 5 hours to get back into shelter, and that's when the fighting resumed. You've had something on the order, Shep, of 2,000 Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza area, 1,600 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel. We're in the midst of this intense interaction now in the Gaza Strip. It has just gotten a lot worse, and now you find the Obama administration with two different crises.
Just for a moment, Sky News reporting, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has instructed the military to begin a ground offensive, and you are looking live and only on Fox News Channel. The explosions are happening now, 10:41 p.m. in Gaza City, and the fires light up the night sky.
For days now, there has been talk about an Israeli ground offensive, and now that it's underway, when and how long will the fighting end or last? I'm joined now by Kate Gould, a lobbyist with a pacifist organization called the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and Matthew Brodsky, a Middle East analyst and former director of policy at the Jewish Policy Center here in Washington. Welcome back to the show, both of you. Kate, you were just here 24 hours ago. You said a ground incursion would make brokering a ceasefire nearly impossible. Here we are now. So what do you make of it?
Israel's ground invasion certainly makes things far more difficult, but we have to redouble efforts to try to get a ceasefire agreement. There will eventually be a ceasefire agreement. The question is how many lives are lost, how much destruction is wrought before that happens.
Matt?
Well, I think Israel has specific goals now. Yes, a ceasefire will eventually happen, but Israeli goals seem to be now not just creating some quiet, but also destroying the tunnels and the infrastructure underneath, for which Hamas has been sending out people into Israel, such as earlier today, right before the ceasefire, to try to kidnap Israeli soldiers. So it seems like the goal has changed. So while there are Israeli soldiers on the ground, I think that they want to take care of that as much as they can before a ceasefire happens.
Do you think Egypt will be the main player here? That has been attempted. You heard Jessica talk about their new leader. What will it take to de-escalate the situation at this point? Or do you think Israel will get what it needs to done and then we'll see some talking later?
The ground invasion will yield no progress. It'll only mean more bloodshed. And Egypt's role is certainly important here. We also need Turkey's role. As your reporter from Tel Aviv mentioned, I mean, the relationship between Turkey and Hamas is very important in all this. But what's critical to note about Egypt's proposal for a ceasefire was that was negotiated with Israel and not with the Hamas leadership. And so for a ceasefire agreement to actually take hold and to work and to stop this killing, then it has to be negotiated with both Israel and Hamas.
Matt, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that that's realistic?
That Egypt can create the ceasefire and be the mediator? I think they're going to have to be. I don't think it's helpful from an American perspective to have too much of the Qataris and too much of the Turkey people, their government involved. They're inherently hostile to Israel to begin with and supportive of the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas by extension. So to the extent that they're involved, I would say it should be to make sure that Hamas doesn't fire rockets, because the ceasefire in the end is going to happen, but it's after Israel, I believe, accomplishes what it's trying to do, and that's, again, tunnels and to destroy stockpiles of rockets where they can find them, because the status quo of just firing rockets at civilians in Israel and then Israel having to respond as any country would, that is something they would like to avoid.
I want to ask your opinion on this, both of you. You know, this escalation started with 4 deaths, 3 Israeli teenagers, 1 Palestinian teenager. Now we have many, many more as a result of that. How long can this last? How many more deaths? I mean, a lot of watchers will say, par for the course, this has happened before, this happens every few years. Could they look back to the 2012 ceasefire and use that as a blueprint to end this?
Definitely. The 2012 ceasefire can certainly serve as a framework going forward. In fact, in July 4th, there was Hamas officials that actually proposed a restoration of the 2012 ceasefire agreement. And what's critical about that agreement, and so different from Egypt's latest proposal, is that requires Israel to make progress toward lifting the blockade. And that's just a critical part. You mentioned these killings of Israeli teenagers, the burning alive of a Palestinian teenager. I mean, all of this horrific violence is obviously something to be condemned. And but an important point to understand the broader context here is that there is this blockade, this 7-year blockade of Gaza, that has imposed so much poverty on the Gaza Strip, meaning that people just can't trade, they can't access education, they can't leave the Gaza Strip, so they can't, including Palestinian Americans who are there right now and trapped in the violence, they can't leave. So there has to be a lifting of the blockade in order to really end this violence, and that was Israel committed to that in the 2012 ceasefire agreement, and that needs to be restored in order to move forward.
Matt gets the last word.
She mentions the 7-year blockade. We should remember that it was 9 years ago that Israel pulled out all of their settlers, all of their military from Gaza, turned it over to the Palestinian Authority. There was no blockade then. The blockade exists to prevent Hamas from acquiring rockets, which is what they're producing. The cement that they use to build the tunnels that they're doing, this is what they're choosing to do instead of building roads or anything that's really helpful for their own people. So the blockade exists for a reason, and what we've seen now is even more sophisticated missiles, more sophisticated rockets. I don't think the blockade, lifting that, is the answer. I think the answer is Hamas should not be in power in Gaza.
All right, Matt Brodsky, Kate Gold, we appreciate you both. We'll have to save the military part for another conversation. Thank you so much.
On now to our David Lee Miller. The lights are off where David Lee is. As we've been reporting, there's a power outage, but you don't want to become a target. So David Lee is in an I see dead people sort of situation. David Lee, what from your vantage point?
Shepard, I'm about a few hundred yards from the Gaza border, and as you mentioned, it is dark, and it's become increasingly dark. During the past few hours, there have been more and more lights going out in Gaza. This is a night operation, and that's the way the Israelis want to operate. They have the advantage. They have the night vision goggles, and they operate best at night. Now, what we're probably observing here are the first few hours of what will likely be a limited ground incursion into Gaza. It is highly unlikely that the Israelis are going to attempt now to retake all of Gaza, but what their goal is here, as we heard John Huddy say, and we can't overstate it enough, it's to go after these tunnels. And when we talk about the tunnel, Shepard, specifically, we're talking here about the infiltration tunnels, the tunnels that they have used to try and infiltrate the Israeli border. A few hours ago, early this morning, 4:30 this morning, 13 militants, Hamas militants, made their way into Israel using one of these tunnels. And it was soon thereafter that the Israeli government apparently made the decision that enough is enough and the tunnels have to be destroyed. Over my shoulder, the blackness behind me, are some of the towns in northern Gaza, Bet Lahia, Bet Hanun. These are some of the towns that the Israelis during the past few days have warned people that they have to evacuate. It is in this same area that a few years ago, Shepard, the Israelis detected an infiltration tunnel and destroyed it before militants could use it to cross the border. What we're witnessing now is the beginning of this process to destroy primarily these infiltration tunnels. This poses a serious threat to Israel. And underscoring that, Shepard, hours after the 13 militants were detected, there was a spotter. There are spotters along the border. There was an airstrike. There were no bodies recovered. No one was captured. It's not clear if any of them were killed or if they all returned alive to Gaza. But there were other reports, at least one other report, of a possible infiltration. This is something that has Israelis very, very concerned, and it is one reason right now that we are witnessing this ground incursion that is taking place. It is very likely the Israelis could be on the ground in Gaza for the next week to 10 days, if in fact this is the limited operation that analysts predict. A great deal will depend on what type of foe Hamas and the other militants prove to be. In the past, going into Gaza was a very difficult undertaking. These tunnels are often booby-trapped. There are also other obstacles in place. There are mines. Hamas is well prepared for this. They have anti-tank missiles. So we could see a very, very bloody fight taking place over the next few days. Shepard?
David Lee, we're showing the video of these militants that you mentioned earlier. These are the militants coming to this tunnel, all racing toward it, and then the Israelis drop a bomb on them. The Israelis have said today, we think we saved a lot of lives here. We think they were coming into Israel. We think they were a mini invasion of sorts.
I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but you are right. I think one of the Israeli officials said a catastrophe was averted. If these militants were successful in their infiltration into Israel, what were they going to do? Well, we don't know for sure, but it's very likely they were going to go to a nearby community, take people hostage, kill Israelis, and or take Israelis captive, kidnap them, and take them back to Gaza. And you might recall that a number of years ago, using an infiltration tunnel, militants crossed the border, captured an Israeli soldier by the name of Gilad Shalit, and held him captive for about 5 years. He was finally returned to Israel, but only in exchange for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, a very heavy price. Israel wants to make sure that doesn't happen again. Shepard.
David Lee Miller, our eyes and ears, our veteran war correspondent on the Israeli-Gaza border. David Lee, as always, thanks very much.